Hey guys, welcome to Through Flood and Flame. Today we're going to be reading the chapter on John Leclerc. Okay, John Leclerc. After this video today, I need you to let me know if you would rather me keep reading or you just want to read on your own. And we'll vote on the preference. If there's people that say it's easier to understand if we're reading it together, great, I'll keep reading it together. And if people say, no, it's fine, I can read it on my own, okay, you can read it on your own. So after this video for today, I need to know, so starting next week, whether or not we keep going or not. Okay, so here we go. We're on the new chapter. This is the first Reformation martyr in France. Remember what a martyr is? Someone that dies for their belief in Jesus Christ. Okay, it says, a common wool carder had dared to denounce the Pope. Okay, so just a commoner, works with wool. He went up against the Pope. The Roman Catholics of the town of Meaux were astounded at his presumption. They were also somewhat alarmed, for they had been rejoicing at having stamped out Protestantism. Okay, so they thought that Protestantism was going away. And then this man came about, again claiming that Protestantism was the truth and that Catholicism was not. They had driven the leading reformers from the town and had congratulated themselves on having taken this step before the heretics had time to make any converts. Okay, so they thought for sure this was gone. They little knew that there were many people in the town who had already become Protestants. So it had already started. Even if they pushed out the reformers, people had already been converted to Protestantism. So the movement had already started there. John Leclerc was one of the first converts to Protestantism when, in 1523, the reformers were expelled from Meaux. He determined to do all in his power to carry on the work that they had been compelled to abandon. He did not preach, but by visiting the Protestants at their houses and expounding the scriptures to them, kept them firm in their faith. After a time, Leclerc's aim in life became to free France from the rule of the Pope, and his enthusiasm led him at times to act imprudently. Okay, so it says right here in the book, and that actually, you got to be careful with that. That inserts an opinion right there when they said that he acted imprudently. Okay, some people might have said that imprudent means not wise. Some people might have said that he was justified in the way that he acted, but the book calls it imprudent. And the fact that it was a little unwise, it was a little fast to react, basically, is what you could say. So yes, he had justification to be against the Pope, but they said maybe the way that he did it was a little imprudent, like you were looking for trouble sometimes, I guess you could say. But that's for you to decide and for us to decide, or for us to just read it because we can't really judge his actions. We don't really know the circumstances, right? He wrote a denunciation of the Pope and fixed the paper on the cathedral door. Okay, so he literally didn't just go against Catholicism. He denounced the Pope himself and put it on the door. Remember who else put a contradiction on the door like that? Martin Luther, but it was against the whole church, not just the person himself. It was this act that roused the indignation of the Catholics. He was seized and after a brief imprisonment was sentenced to be beaten through the streets on 3 successive days. And finally, to be branded on the forehead. Okay, branded on the forehead. Like he was to be beaten through the streets for 3 days. Successive means that one after another. And to be branded, that means that they took the hot metal that they put in the fire and then they put it right here to brand a letter on you. That is painful, okay? It says, with his hands tied together and his back bared, Leclerc was led from the prison and whipped through the streets. The crowd hooted him, but neither the jeers of the people nor the blows of the executioners caused him to quail. The blood poured from his back, but he uttered no cry for mercy. The second day's punishment he bore with the same fortitude. On the third day, the whipping ceased at the place where criminals were executed. A fire was burning, and the branding irons were red hot. No time was wasted. As Leclerc stood with the blood streaming from his bare back, the executioner took an iron from the fire and placing it against his forehead, branded him as a heretic. A heretic is someone that goes against the religion. Okay, so that means that wherever he went, people are going to know why he was branded. Leclerc bore his torture without a murmur. The crowd, seeing him branded, burst into shouts of triumph. But when their brutal glee subsided, a voice exclaimed loudly so that all could hear, Jesus Christ and his ensigns forever. Everyone turned in the direction of the speaker, eager to see who it was that had dared to utter such a cry. And then they saw that it was a woman who had spoken. "Who is she?" they asked each other. And someone answered that she was Leclerc's mother. This was true, that she was the mother of the branded man, and she was a Protestant. Proud that her son should suffer for the name of Jesus, she had followed him through the streets, and while the executioners were thrashing him and the people were jeering, she had comforted and sustained him with extracts from the Bible. So she was reading him verses from the Bible as he went along for encouragement. The cry of Jesus Christ and his ensigns forever seemed to petrify the priests. They gazed at the woman without uttering a word. For a few minutes she stood calmly surveying them. Then, turning away, she passed slowly through the crowd and went home. As soon as Leclerc had partially recovered from the torture he had undergone, he quitted the town, and after visiting 2 or 3 places, settled at Metz. The mark on his forehead proclaimed him a Protestant wherever he went, but he was proud of the brand, and as determined as ever he had been to further the Reformation. While engaged at his trade of preparing wool for spinning, he managed to find many opportunities for speaking of Christ to his fellow men, and this was the means of converting many of them to the Protestant faith. Protestantism was spreading rapidly in Metz when Leclerc, acting as if he believed in accordance with the scriptures, took a step which might have checked its growth. Catholic chapel containing images of the Virgin and many saints. About an hour's walk from the city, there was a Roman Catholic chapel containing images of the Virgin and many saints. Once a year, people of Metz made a pilgrimage to worship the images and to receive what it was thought forgiveness of their sins. Okay, you know the pilgrimage is, right, a religious trip somewhere. So people in his community would travel there. When I say an hour walk, okay, to go there and worship the images of the Catholic Church. So they're saying, okay, he's about to do something that might mess some things up that he did, thinking that this is what the Bible told him to do. Leclerc wished to prevent this idolatry, so plainly denounced in the second commandment. And he was strengthened in his desire by his reading of Exodus 23:24. "Thou shalt not bow down to their gods, nor serve them, nor do after their works, but thou shalt utterly overthrow them and quite break down their images." Okay, so look what he does. It seemed clear to Leclerc that it was his duty to destroy the Roman Catholic images, and on the night before the pilgrimage, he quitted the city and proceeded to the chapel. Leclerc had told no one of his intention, and when he had entered the chapel, he was not quite convinced that he ought to destroy the images. Okay, so he wasn't sure whether or not this was the right thing to do or not, but he had gone there to think about it. For nearly an hour, he sat in the silent building gazing at them and asking himself whether it was really his duty to attempt their destruction. At length, he came to the conclusion that it was, and taking them from his places, he dashed them to pieces on the ground. Then, leaving the chapel, he returned home. Probably not going to go well for him on that one. On the following morning, the pilgrims marched from the city with music playing, banners flying, and crucifixes held aloft. Okay, so you can imagine it. This is a huge event. They're about to make a pilgrimage. They're about to worship the idols, right? And they're on their way. Arriving at the destination, the priests entered the chapel and were horrified to see the images lying broken in pieces in front of the altar. Hurrying out, they told the people of the destruction that had been wrought. At first, the people were silent from amazement, but soon their surprise gave way to indignation. That's ira, anger, right? And uttering shouts of vengeance, they hurried back to the city with the intention of arresting every person who was suspected of being a heretic. But before they reached the city, a man remembered that early that morning he had seen Leclerc coming from the direction of the chapel. That he was the offender, everyone was at once convinced. For did he not carry on his forehead the brand of a heretic? Rushing into the city, the angry mob seized Leclerc and accused him of having destroyed the images of the Virgin and the saints. Without the slightest hesitation, Leclerc admitted the charge, adding that God only should be worshipped. Protected from the fury of the mob by the local guardians of the peace, he was hurried to the judges, to whom he again admitted the charge and added a denunciation against idolatry. The judges quickly pronounced sentence. He was to be burned alive. Calm and self-possessed, Leclerc was led away to die a fearful death. Terrible as was the sentence he received, the executioners added to its horrors. Okay, so yes, the judgment was he was to be burned alive, but they made it even worse. They cut off his right hand, burnt off his nose with red-hot pincers, broke his arms with the same tools, and cruelly burnt him about the body. So they made it a slow, painful death. And while he was suffering this fiendish torture, he repeated in a loud voice, Psalm 115:4. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. The people were awe-stricken by his bravery. The curses and jeers which they had been hurling at him ceased. In silence and terror, they watched the martyr in his torture and listened to his denunciations of idolatry. The cruel preliminaries ended. Leclerc was burnt to death over a slow fire. The onlookers, still awed, waited until he was dead and then departed silent and perplexed. Surely, he thought, no man could simply of his own strength endure so bravely the torture that Leclerc had suffered. They pondered over it for many weeks, and the death of the first Reformation martyr in France caused hundreds of Roman Catholics to study the writings of Luther and his friends. Okay, so it definitely brought some thought to people that maybe they need to look into this and see if this is the religion they should believe. Here are your questions to answer. Number 1, did you read with me? Okay, did you read? Number 2, what were 2 things he did to get in trouble with the people? Number 3, what did his death accomplish for Protestantism? What did his death accomplish for Protestantism? So there are some things that it accomplished for the cause of Christ. And what did his death accomplish for the Catholics? So from the perspective of the Protestants, how did his death help? For the perspective of the Catholics, how did his death help them? Okay, on both sides, feel like there was something to gain from the death of John Leclerc. So what was it? Okay, and let me know, text me, let me know what you prefer. Videos to read or to read on your own. Okay, bye.